Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our conversation today around rethinking talent leadership. Tell your neighbor, it's a good place to be, isn't it? As I keep saying this, I almost feel like a pastor. Maybe before we continue, we should collect the offering first. But anyway, nonetheless, welcome to our conversations today, and we're going to have a very exceptional panel of people where we're going to have the discussion on rethinking talent leadership. I'm Nick Ombewa. I work at AMI with a very great team of people who are also in the room. I'm sure somewhere down the line you'll get to meet them. And I'll be your facilitator for the day. To drive our conversations, particularly around this rethinking talent leadership, ladies and gentlemen, we have three exceptional leaders with us, and they bring a wealth of experience that they're going to share with us, definitely unique perspectives and conversations that we're going to engage in, and I'm sure you really want to get to hear what they have to say, and even we are going to be able to have an opportunity to interact with them. So why don't we put our hands together, even as I get to invite each and every one of them to the stage one by one, so that we can just get to have that moment where we can have a conversation with them. But as they come, I need you to be prepared to this sense that, yes, we're going to hear quite a bit about them as I get to ask them a few questions. But I think this also prepares you from where you sit through in personal experience, or maybe even challenges you're currently encountering, some conversations that you'd want to come forth. Maybe you're looking for an answer, and it's going to be right here based on some of the conversations we're going to have and engage with together. So please write some of those things down, and when that time comes for you to ask the question to the panelists, you'll have an opportunity to do that in that open space. And we're going to have a break shortly thereafter. And even as we have a break, as we take some bit of drinks here and there, which is water, tea, or juice, sorry. But I've come to realize, I had a session at some point when I was discussing with lawyers, and said lawyers are the most difficult group to engage. Because if your communication is ambiguous, right there they will find something to tie you down. And so we have to be very specific. Nick drinks, I want my hard one, where is it? So I had not clarified to be water, juice, and something of that sort. So yes, water and everything else that will be there. We have an opportunity to engage one with another. So without too much ado, ladies and gentlemen, I am that man who's been prepared, been sent into the wilderness to pave the way for these guys. Their shoes I'm not worthy of tying. Allow me as I invite to stage a transformational HR leader with 15 years of experience in aligning talent strategy with business goals, driving leadership excellence, and shaping high performance. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Beth Kajuju. Come on, Beth. All right. Until she sits, isn't it? Yeah. Beth is the current Chief People Officer at Capwell Industries. All right. Moving on, allow me to invite our next panelist, a change management and leadership expert with 18 years experience in HR consulting, specializing in aligning talent with business growth and building resilient cultures. Again, allow me to invite to stage here, Susan Chege. All right. You remember the Susan I said I wasn't going to mention? Thank you. Susan Chege is a certified ProSci or ProSci change manager and is also an executive coach. We're glad to have you, Susan. Thank you. Finally, on stage, I'd like to invite an engineer. All right, almost like an outlier. An engineer turned leadership coach who's passionate about emotional well-being, like we all should, isn't it? All right, where he's learned to blend psychotherapy and NLP, that's neuro-linguistic programming, into his leadership approach. Now it's a he. At AMI, we follow the constitution that has been laid to make sure that any gender composition complies. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Asim Shah. Asim, we're glad to have you. Asim is currently the CEO of Tapo Industries and is also a leadership coach. That's our panel, good people. We can all give them one round of applause. Great. And I'm honored to be the one to facilitate our conversations together with the team. Allow me to get myself to the seat as well. That's for my team to supply me with constant hot water. That's the cue. I hope they remember the code. Boy, don't I just love you guys. Before we get into the heart of the matter, good people, I'd just like to go through our panelists where they'll just tell us a little bit more about themselves, probably touching a little bit on their experience, and maybe one thing that even if you go through their LinkedIn profile, you will not find. Something that's interesting about their journey before we get into the heart of the conversation. Isn't it good? So we get to know something personal, a little bit about them before we get into the professional things. And so in the same order that we came in, so as I talk more, Beth is preparing, and Susan knows it's coming next, and so is Asim. So Beth, why don't we begin with you?
Thank you very much, Nick. Nick, where do you get all this energy from? Do you smoke something in the morning?
I think that's a good note. I will need to talk to my supplier to keep supplying whatever it is that they are supplying.
Amazing. Thank you, guys. I'm very, very honored to be here. Thank you, Amy team. Beth Kajuju, as you've heard, 15 years is actually an understated a little bit. I can actually confirm that it's close to 20 years of HR experience right now. And I'm super, super excited to see you. Connie, she reminds me of where I started. We started in HR with her at G4S many years ago, those 20 years ago. So very, very honored. And of course, I'm so, so happy to see my former schoolmate. It's really a small world. So definitely confirms that I went to school. So my HR career and my journey was not one that I went to school to plan for. So I am a professional from a paperwork point of view. I did BCom and actually started working in the accounts department. And for about 4 years, I was doing balancing of those accounts, and I started doing this work from home. I could predict what I was going to do. I could tell how those papers would look. I could actually predetermine and tell how my day would look like. And luckily, I got somebody that spoke to me about my career while at G4S. And that's how I got to personally choose to change from BCom to HR, and I've not looked back. So I say I'm a HR practitioner who is good with the numbers. I look at people, and I'm glad that my current job title is Chief People Officer. I look at people as people. I am very passionate about getting the best out of people. And in my career, I focus on getting the biggest potential out of you, out of an individual. And I normally say, my tagline is, when the day I'll get all people managers up their game and do their best on their people skills, I'm happy to retire. So that's me. Thank you.
It's still morning. Good morning, everyone. How are you? Water. I guess you have to be Nick. As Nick said, my name is my name is Susan Chege. I think the easiest way to describe who I am is I'm a people person. From a very early age, as far back as high school, I knew that people intrigue me because we're all so different, yet very much the same. We all have something that was given to us before we were even born in terms of purpose, and we were already equipped with everything that we need to pursue that purpose. And that's what I've been passionate about. Although I knew I wanted to do HR as far back as high school, and after I did my degree, I didn't get a HR job, so I had a stint selling Subarus, which I still love to date. And I then spent the next 18 years as a HR leader, and then the 3 years thereafter as a HR consultant offering HR services to my clients. And then after that 20-something years, I said, okay, I can afford the Subaru that I want. So I bought the Subaru, and then I said, I'm all about potential and purpose. So I'm, refocusing my energy to help others identify what their purpose is and what their potential is. And I do this through executive coaching. I apply change management principles and emotional intelligence to do that, and with the objective of everyone smiling like this. I'm as colorful as my tall. There's something. And Nick started with me from the So let's put it out there. Razzmatazz.
It's not me with the mic controls.
So, so yes, as vibrant as my top is, I like people to enjoy the sunny days of life even when the storm is around. So I'm excited to meet all of you, and I look forward to interacting with all of you, and let's have fun.
Excellent. Well done. Thank you, Susan. Asim, over to you.
Well, hearing myself on a microphone is really weird. Yeah, engineers in the house, put your hands up. Oh, wow. Okay, cool. I was, not expecting that. Yeah, I've been in the workspace for 18 years, I think. A little bit of a story: when I was in high school, didn't know what I was going to study at university, took a psychometric assessment, and the results came back and it suggested I should look at doing engineering, psychology, architecture, and air traffic control. And I was like, okay, air traffic control, we'll park it. Architecture, I was like, do I want to spend 7 years in university? Psychology sounded like a lot of maths, statistics maths. So I picked engineering. Great. Yeah, and I came back to the country about 12 years ago, got diagnosed with clinical depression, started a journey in therapy, and ended up training as a therapist and a life coach in the process. And as I was training, I started looking at, okay, I need to do something academic again as well. And guess what I went to do? Something in architecture. So I ticked the box for engineering, I ticked the box for psychology, sort of, with the coaching and therapy, and I ticked the box for architecture. So now I'm waiting for the air traffic control. Yeah, so I guess I blend a lot of different skill sets to look at leadership specifically, and emotional wellness in the workspace as well. So yeah, back to you, Nick.
Excellent. Thank you. Again, round of applause to the team there. Going through clinical depression, you called it, Asim, and getting out of it. And I know you have something to share a little bit later about that, but we'll come back to that. I think now I'm prepping ourselves for some of the questions that I have for the panel, and let's start with Beth. All right. So, Beth, you have experience across diverse industries and HR functions. And how have you seen leadership strategies evolve, particularly within the business environments, as well as things also change? And how have you come up with strategies probably to succeed amidst these changes that are out there?
So, funny enough, when I started working, I think I also started in a company that was quite analog, let me just put it that way, and with all due respect, because we were using the old ways of guarding, the old ways of, managing. I don't think you can modernize a dog in terms of making it a security dog as such. So that's what G4S was. And looking at that organization and the leadership of those days, when I started work, because I'm telling you my story, the leadership was very autocratic. It was directive. It is, we know, so do what we tell you. So it's obey, comply, get work done. And you can imagine, that's the instruction you give a guard: salute, open the gate, close. Okay? So that's really my story. That was how leadership was then. And what I can say is, and this not just because of the company, but even the people, even at home, it was that is how I grew up. The kind of leadership I got from school, from parenting, my now me being the child, from the people around me, is I listen to what they say and I do. And walking through the journey of the transformation journey, I can call it, we no longer look at leadership in organizations from a task-oriented, you have to get this task done. And the question when you meet across the corridors with the leaders, have you completed that task? So there was even no time for greetings. It's, has the work gotten done? So that autocratic leadership has had to shed off along the way. We've moved, I've seen that, move from that kind of directive leadership to collaborative ways of leadership. We're getting into this space where we are currently, which we hope to get to move from good to great, is leaders who are more approaching, their approach is people-oriented. You'll have leaders who are asking about how you are first before they get to know whether you have completed whatever needed to be completed. So these are people focused, not so much task oriented. There's awareness, there's an emotional intelligence approach to it. You can actually see leaders who read the room and they say, hey, Beth doesn't look like she's in a good mood today, so let me not ask about the assignment. Let me just wait. Maybe she looks like she needs to cool off. Or they actually want to find out where you are on a particular task, but they call you in the meeting room and they're like, are you okay? Can you just, you seem to be going through something. I'll talk to you later. So there is that delay because they're getting more aware of not only themselves as leaders, but also aware of the people they're working with. And that's really important because we're moving to people-centric approaches in the way we do our work. And if you haven't gotten there, it's really a challenge to you also. If you're managing people and all you do every morning is ask, where are you on your tasks? Please get to that approach of find out how they are first, greet people, check on them first, and then ask about the work. And then when it comes to decision making, it's not directive anymore. There's the approach of collaboration, there's democracy, there's your opinion. What do you think about this? What are your views even before we come to this decision making? And that's really improving in terms of engagement issues at work because you feel valued when your boss comes and asks for an opinion from you. And actually, you even feel better when that opinion of yours is applied or implemented or executed. And you feel part and parcel of this organization. So that's a kind of leadership. That's what I've seen over the years. And currently, as probably just I need to mention on what really we're focusing on is the transformational leadership, the adaptive ways, the agile ways of thinking. So leaders now, you're moving a little more from just being collaborative, democratic, but you're pushing guys to more inspirational ways of doing things. Go do this, you're feeling more empowered, there's trust being built, which is where we need to be going to. Of course, all those kinds of leaderships had their pros and cons. The autocratic way of doing things had its cons, but it was also very good when it came to decision making. So once in a while, even in the current leadership, you'll find there's some areas where because of quick decision making, then a directive will be given so that we move on. The democratic way of doing it had its own good benefits, but it could lead to paralysis of analysis because everybody has an opinion before now you put your heads together. No, my point needs to be taken into consideration, so all that. So that also needs to be managed very effectively. So if you open up that kind of leadership to your team members, then you also need to be ready to effectively manage it so that it becomes constructive. And of course, the inspirational way of leading, the focus that we should all be looking for, they need to move away from the leaders because sometimes it's very geared on the leader, the charismatic leader. So what happens is when that leader moves on and hasn't done a proper succession planning, you're left struggling because that transformational way of thinking, that inspiration was in the person, not in the role. So this is where people managers, this is where HR people need to come in and say, you don't want the culture of a place being shaped by just that individual. You want it to be something ingrained by everyone. So you stop moving from people who are leading to the roles. What do you want in that role? So when you're recruiting looking for the people who can fit in that role, but you make that role transformational, inspirational. You make sure that you're picking people who can carry that mantle forward. So those are the things that I've seen, I've experienced, and that we keep seeing every day.
All right, Beth, thank you. Setting the pace there for us very well. Looking for the right perfect balance between those different types of leadership styles brings me close to what now I'd like Susan to address. So we've seen shifts, not only in the country, it's a global thing happening right now. We've seen from June last year the shift with our Gen Zs, and they're finding themselves right now in the workplace as well. Organizations are facing some significant shifts as well. So in your experience, therefore, what are the most critical leadership strategies we may need to either stop because they're just not working anymore, or those that we may need to start because, yes, getting the right kind of mix or balance is also not easy for everybody, but also maybe where do we need to focus on, not only to survive, but to thrive in terms of changing the business landscapes?
Thanks, Nick. I think it's the start to address this challenge is to re-examine what leadership is. When we think in the corporate setup, or even at a national setup, we think as leadership as the leader is someone who will get you to what your targets are. Achievement of target, achievement of goals. That's what we think of when we think of leaders, right? I want to challenge us to rethink that and realize that leadership is actually the responsibility to inspire and motivate people to want to follow you to a certain destination that is mutually beneficial. That's what leadership is. It's not about hitting the targets and we all then get a bonus, divide, whatever. It's about me being worth following. As a leader, I want you to look at me and want to go the journey with me. As a leader, I hold the responsibility to understand what is important to you so that where we're going, both you and I and whatever organization we are serving, all benefit. So the stop is, let's stop leading towards goals. 2025, we said we're going to hit this. The start is, let's focus on leading people. And that calls, it's a tall order. Because leading people means you need to stop and understand your people. Understand them in terms of what is important to them. Understand them in terms of what are their personal goals. Understand them in terms of how do you unlock the optimal environment, circumstances, opportunities for them. So leadership is a really grand responsibility, not because you're charged with the final balance sheet, but because you're charged with all that energy towards understanding, internalizing, aligning your own makeup as a human being, how I communicate, how I interact, to suit your people in a way that inspires them to come along with you and inspires them not only just to follow because they're my boss and I must follow, but inspire them to give of their all. That's the it's back, but I'm suspicious. So, in terms of the stop, it's stop leading targets. The start is start getting really engaged on who the people are. And the focus is the real human. So there's an organization somewhere in this Kenya where they call their HR human remains. That pains me. It pains me because it means that it's the remains part that they're focused on. So as HR people, and when I say HR people, I don't mean the HR department. I mean anyone charged with people. You're all HR people. The HR, the focus needs to go back to the human. And it's a lot of work. Good leadership is a lot of work. So get excited about it because it's a responsibility. And when you look to the future and the people that you've worked with and led are doing well, it is accolades to you. So focus on the human, stop leading purely targets, and start getting fully engaged with the human. Thanks.
Human remains. I've never heard of that before. But it's quite telling, isn't it? I'm reminded of words by John Maxwell, particularly in the definition of leadership. John Maxwell defines leadership as leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And influence is definitely the ability to have an impact on people. And when you look at it from a leadership perspective, is how then do you come across? Come across to help people unpack their personal and professional potential. And Asim, this one is for you. I mean, your journey from engineering to coaching is fascinating. I mean, how you ticked those boxes and now you want to tick one more box. We're waiting to see how that goes. But how has your engineering background, particularly, I know, in areas around quality systems, tensile architecture for what you currently do as the CEO at Tapo, how has that influenced your approach to leadership coaching, where you actually get to speak to the hearts and minds of the people that you lead to help unpack both their personal and professional potential?
I think academic qualification or experience is mostly conscious level stuff. So the engineering or the architectural stuff is helping me relate with the person I'm speaking to or the team that I'm speaking to. It allows the creation of rapport. It allows us to have a commonality for communication. It breaks the ice. Coaching comes from the heart. It's not headspace stuff. Coaching. So I'm using my engineering background or the architectural stuff because it cuts across different sectors. Everybody walks into a space and they appreciate, the architecture of a space, whether they consciously know it or subconsciously. And it allows us to have a conversation. It then knocks down the walls so that then I can speak heart to heart. I'd say that's the every single coaching related conversation starts with what is the conscious stuff, what's going on, and then we speak body language to body language, grab the water, and what does grabbing water feel like when you think about it from your heart as opposed to your head?
I'm together with the audience because I can see guys going, You almost really came out very philosophical in your approach there. And I'm sure you're picking something that you will definitely want to ask the panelists. And I can appreciate, I can see guys really writing, and I hope you're not drawing me from where you are. But here's one more question before then I open this up, because I'm sure we all want to raise our voices to some of the challenges we face, or ask of a different opinion to probably shape your perspective or in terms of how you get to do things. Beth, I'm coming to you. So you've had different leadership roles again. I mean, touching on your years of experience. You've been at APA Insurance, Oxford University Press as well. You've developed and implemented a lot of HR processes to align with business goals as usual. What do you think are the most important HR practices? And here we are sticking to human resources, not human remains. Practices that organizations need to focus in 2025 to create a competitive advantage now that we are all aware it's the people.
Thanks, Nick. I think also, as you mentioned the companies, you also noticed the industries were quite different. So the most beautiful thing about HR is we can flow in any industry because we're dealing with people anyway. So one, the bag has come to me, Susan, I don't need to sit next to me. We are sharing things. So 1 minute in pharmaceutical, then publishing, then insurance industry, and currently back to manufacturing. But one thing that is very common is people are people everywhere. And in my experience, I've also dealt with both local, like I am currently, and multinationals. So again, in a multinational, you'll find different races, different countries, different tribes, different everything. But the bottom line is people remain people. So when you're thinking about HR policies, again, just to echo Susan's words, you have to think about the human. What is it that we require now? And focus for 2025, just to stick to Nick's question, is first, we need to undo or unlearn, relearn, and do a lot of learning. And the rigidity and inflexibility that sits with all policies, including HR policies, is one thing that we all really need to completely unlearn, relearn, and learn. We can't keep fixated on policies that were working many years ago. Otherwise, we'll be dealing with, I don't know the people who are dealing with the Butere girls, what they're going through right now. The parents, to the teachers, to, I'm sure we know. Did we watch news last evening? Yeah. So you can imagine if you're still rigid and fixated at dealing with that case, the same way you'd have dealt with 10, 20 years ago. You have to think on your toes. So one of the things that we have to keep doing when it comes to our HR policies is very, very alert, very agile, and very adaptable. You cannot close on because your SOP and your review period says to be reviewed after 1 year. You just sit back and you're telling your quality people, I can't review this policy, its review date is next year. No, guys, we will get caught up. So that agility, that adaptability, that quick turnaround is something you need to have that voice to say this has now surpassed the test of times. Yes, it can give us a guideline for the next 6 months, but it needs to be reviewed because this is now what is happening currently. This is what, so that agility, that adaptability has to be embraced in our policies. And one of the other areas of focus is really now the world has opened up. We have changing demographics, not only from an age point of view, but even from socio-economic changes. So diversity and inclusion has to be part of our HR policies. So embracing a lot of diverse ways of looking at things. If pension schemes don't work for you because agencies don't understand, don't appreciate that they will be working with you until they retire, what else can you give for them? What can you make, what options are available for them if they don't want to get into a pension scheme? So that rigidity and inflexibility mentality in our policies really, really has to keep changing. We need to look at what is it, how diverse are we in our policies, how inclusive are we in our policies, what is this that we can recommend for changes and even stand up for in terms of the recommendations. The other thing is just appreciating that we're in a VUCA environment. VUCA being an acronym for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That is everywhere, not just in Kenya. And for those of us, of course, who are working with multinationals in the room, understand this is a common terminology that I'm sure our leaders speak to us about. So how then do we stay ahead of the curve as HR managers, stay ahead of the change curve in our policies to address all these uncertainties? So we need to keep reviewing these policies very frequently. We need to keep adapting, keep changing, and keep giving these recommendations that are applicable to our current circumstances. The focus here being on that agility and that adaptability on all HR-related policies. So I think that's my input.
Very well said, Beth. Susan, coming to you. Not all organizations are at the same level of growth. Some are large corporates, some are small, some are still probably transitioning from the founding stage. Some are now probably getting to the growth stage where they're beginning to experience some level of growth and expansion. And just trying to maintain that balance really requires a completely different approach. And it's a balancing act to just make sure that there's a lot of sustainability and agility, as Beth has talked about, just to make sure that things get to work. Based on your experience, how can organizations formalize now their processes without losing, again, what Beth has just talked about, that agility and flexibility that comes either with being a more smaller or a more dynamic organization?
I think, Nick, I'll ask you. You've said many words, so I might ask you to. I might ask you to clarify. You're asking how can an organization formalize their culture,
Yes.
irrespective
the policies,
their policy, irrespective of
their size,
and
yes, and still remain agile and adaptable.
Thank you for that. The word culture came when I was reiterating because that's what my brain was processing. So when I think of policies and procedures, First of all, let me disclose how you end up being called human remains. Is when every time an employee comes to you, your response is, the policy says, the process is, the form is on the shared drive. That's how you end up being called human remains. So take a step back and ask yourself, what is the function of policies and procedures? Policies and procedures are there to create a context that is equitable, predictable, and have some controls within an environment. However, your policies, or not however, hand in hand with that, your policies and procedures need to be reflective of your culture. There's a message, or there's who you are as an organization, or who you want to be as an organization. Policies and procedures are meant to support and catalyze that, not the other way around. So to make sure that your policies and procedures are remaining agile and flexible and dynamic enough to keep up with the VUCA environment and the BANI environment, you need to make sure that they are centered on the culture of the organization. So what are the values? That is what informs your policies and procedures. What is, there are things like the equity that Beth also mentioned, equity, the inclusion, the diversity. Whatever you stand for as an organization is what defines or informs your policies and procedures. So if that is your center bolt, that won't change much because who you are is who you are. Now the policies and procedures are how you go about it. So refocusing back on what you're achieving with your policies. So ask yourself, what are you achieving with these policies? As you go back to review, what am I trying to achieve? What am I addressing? Number 2, remember who these policies are for. So what is it that these people need? I am one of these days going to start a movement where I want to challenge companies to really rethink the offering to the employee, personalize the employee experience. As we've said, we have people from all sorts of different demographics, ages, backgrounds, experiences, which comes with them having very different aspirations, very different things when they think of what is important to them. Can you imagine an organization where part of the onboarding process includes me as a new employee declaring how I'd like to receive my feedback? Is it formal, informal? Is it weekly? Is it quarterly? Is it virtual? Is it physical? Also in that onboarding, aligning with my supervisor or my performance manager to align on those things. Does it cost us anything? As an organization, does it cost us anything? Not really, but I'm now speaking to my audience. How about, just as Beth had mentioned, permanent and pensionable? What if the emerging generation doesn't want permanent and pensionable? I want you to put together my money, and at the end of this particular project, you give me my money and I go to Hawaii, then I'll come back and think about whether I want another contract. So start thinking about whether your policies and procedures, yes, they're upholding the culture, but are they addressing the people that you want them to address? So flexibility and agility comes in understanding your environment. Be aware. Be aware of what is happening out there, what is happening with our organizations. I think one of the things that we flop at as leaders is we are up there, but as Nick said earlier, most of us are probably Kenyans. Vitu kwa ground are so different. And so we are writing policies and procedures, best practice, benchmarking on leading emerging practices. But that is not your organization. So get real. So your policies and procedures need to be in alignment with your culture, but also need to be very relevant for whom they are helping. Yeah.
Well said. Asim, finally, Beth said something, mentioning the words learn and relearn, and it reminds me of my favorite quote by the gentleman who wrote the book Future Shock, Alvin Toffler. It says that the illiterate of the 21st century will not necessarily be those who cannot read nor write, but rather those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And you're dealing with AMI here, which is a learning organization that seeks to throw in development for leaders at different levels in different organizations. And from where you sit, learning is an important fundamental aspect of growth for people at the organization at different levels. And I know we can structure topics, titles, modules around aspects of leadership, touching on the soft skills, the technical skills as well. But all of us here would agree, majority of people, and probably even some of us in this room, are properly stressed, true or not true. All right? There's a lot of things we are dealing with emotionally, mentally, and we've seen the mental state of employees, for some of us in our own organizations, really get a beating because of very many things going around. I mean, the other day, people who are having long-term engagement employments, then Trump checks in, and that has changed for very many people. Guys who are dealing with mortgage in dollar loans now don't know what to do. So you have gone through some elements of, should I call it, checking into aspects that deal with the human well-being from a psychology perspective. And my question to you, having taken that long route, before then we open up the floor to the rest of the participants here, those who are listening to us, is how do you integrate emotional well-being into leadership development, especially in high-pressure environments?
I would go back to firstly what Beth and Susan have spoken about. Specifically, Susan mentioned something about let's not look at the numbers before we look at the journey. If I can paraphrase it, and let's also start learning about ourselves before we start teaching others how to. So can we first learn about ourselves? Can we be vulnerable to ourselves so that we understand what we actually feel? Once we know what we feel, then we're able to understand what somebody else feels. And we're able to have that conversation authentically, very honestly, and it allows that authenticity and honesty allows psychological safety for that conversation to then evolve into how are you feeling? How can I support you? And as a leader, you've got to lead by example. So in all of that stuff, if I was to summarize it, how well are you learning about yourself on a daily basis? How vulnerable are you with yourself? Not necessarily actioning on the thoughts that you're having, but becoming aware of the thoughts that you're having.
All right. So it's almost self-leadership and leading from a level of heightened self-awareness, but also from a place of empathy, because then when you can put yourself in the other person's shoe, then you can know exactly how to navigate and mitigate some of the challenges you're going through.
Exactly.
All right. And now I open it up to all of us who've been sitting pensively and listening and writing, and probably writing a few questions that you want to throw. And I can see now you're smiling at me, looking at me nicely. Who'd like to go first? And I'll have my team coming in, just getting ready to support us with the mic movement here as we get participants, those of us in the room who have been keenly listening to our panelists, to be able to ask their questions and see if we can get some answers and support coming through. All right. Where do we begin? So, Collins, yes, we can have a mic. There was one that went for battery change. We've not seen it back. We could we could try and get it. I think Asim's was also dying there somewhere. Yeah, it's also on red. It's okay? All right, good. So, back to you guys. And I can see there's a hand up there, Collins. We're going to get that going. Direct your question to any of the panelists, and I'm sure they'll be ready to take it up.
All right, thank you. My name is Janet, and work at Savannah Informatics as the people leader. So I have a question more directed towards Asim. So you mentioned as a leader, you need to be self-aware first before you actually lead others. Now, sitting at, call it leadership, management, level, how do you influence these leaders to actually see that for them to be more, what's the word? just lead with purpose, I guess, right? And influence others, because we look up to them, right? People look up to the leadership team, right? But if they're not self-aware enough to, be this self-aware leader, how do I come in as a people leader to actually tell them that, guys, we need to shift, we need to have more people-centric initiatives, but they see that that's a woke culture. So how do I get them to see that they need to shift, refocus, and have now, a people-centric approach for us to, win?
I actually think these guys they were having a conversation about something almost exactly that. So I'm gonna give the mic to them.
There we go.
Thanks. That's a really great question. And as he's saying, we were talking about it earlier. And I think the best approach is to open their eyes to actually the reality and the impact of leadership, and more importantly, the very underrated catalytic nature of emotional intelligence in leadership. Yeah. So just going back to the way I redefined leadership, this is the conversations we need to have with our leaders who our people are following. That even as we are in this room, if you try and think back to the leader who had the most impact in your life, it could or could not be maybe the most successful company, but it's the person for whom you can remember how they made you feel and want to move. Those are the conversations you need to have with your leaders. It's about exposing them to leadership through EQ so that they start to realize that me giving that little of myself. Let me shift gear there. My mind switched a little bit. Let me shift gear there. EQ in leadership, people do accept that it's a lot of work. But do you realize that it is also for your own self-preservation? We are enjoying leadership, but we want to get through it alive. EQ includes that self-awareness that Asim was talking about, to the extent of knowing when you need to stop, and what you need to continue. So that's where the conversation starts, with making them aware. So EQ has become a buzzword, but people are not having real conversations about it, although resources are actually available everywhere. And free resources. There are a lot of programs that start a campaign, and I like giving people very practical solutions. Start a campaign within the organization where you say, during this 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock lunch hour, we will all be logging on to this webinar that is running every month on the third Wednesday, and I'll tell you which one that is. The third Wednesday of every month, there's an emotional intelligence conversation that happens from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. And challenge your leaders to say, start your influence as a leader leading those ahead of you or above you. Start by telling them, you know what, I need you to do this because I want these guys to attend. But really, they're the target, right? So tell them, I want you guys to log on to this thing so that everyone else can log on. And by them logging on, they start to hear what that self-awareness looks like, what social awareness looks like, what empathy looks like. And then we are not rocks. What we hear time and time again starts to influence even our behavior. Then start facilitating conversations where that can happen, where we're talking about EQ with our leadership, where we are saying, okay, please support me. It's not you, but support me so that we can teach middle management how leadership with EQ looks like. Then you give them the notes. As they're reading the notes, it starts to sink in for them as well. And at the end of the day, that empathy is not empathy just for your people. And it's not sympathy, by the way. It's empathy, understanding their position, but also comes with self-empathy. And like we said, we're under a lot of pressure. If we can all learn EQ, if not only for moving along with our people, but also for our self-preservation, we all come out of it alive.
Well said. Very well said. All right. The mic still has the opportunity to move. Collins is on standby. Who else has a question to the panel? Yes, Collins, right in front of you. Thank you.
Good morning. So wonderful presentation. My name is Titus Kihio from Spinners and Spinners, part of the team that takes care of training. My question is, how do you embed learning practically into the flow of work so that it's not overwhelming and people are inspired to deliver the win? Before AMI takes it,
I can take that one very clearly, but I am sure it was for the panelists. Yes, go on.
May I add something on that?
Yes, please.
And also to ensure there is not, my name is Helen.
Yes, Helen.
Yeah, to ensure there is no training fatigue.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I'll take this. I hope I'm audible. Remember, I said HR, but good with numbers. So I probably just want to complete this, that I still did my master's in HR. And I still did a lot of other HR courses. And one of the things that I did, of course, naturally, I was inclined personally, I'm using my story, I was inclined to comp and bend and reward practices because that's where the graphs make sense for me, that's where all the statistical, analytical work, that's where my heart was drawing to. But I had then to interpret this to layman language and practically make sense out of it and be able to interpret it and explain it to people who would not go through that. So through my personal training, I actually took it that as a person, first of all, the learning has to be in you. So we struggle so much as HR leaders to pull this need. So in the training needs analysis, the first and fundamental thing that needs to be that buy-in from the learner, of the person who is being trained. If you force it through it, change imposed is change opposed. They will come to that class or training room, they will go through the training, they will tick that box, and they will put the learning materials, and they continue back to doing their things the way they did it anyway. So getting that buy-in is a very back to basics concept, but getting that buy-in first and foremost from the attendees themselves is very important. So you have to do a bit of marketing, unfortunately or fortunately. You have to do a bit of education. You have to do a little bit of groundwork. You have to roll your sleeves a little bit to make the people that are attending that training understand the importance of that training, because that buy-in is very important. Just sending a list from HR that you guys need to attend this training on this and this day without having gone through the background. Just make everybody understand why that training is relevant to them. Make that, and I'm saying market it, not because you also need to, you need your return on investment from this training, and it's coming from them. So doing a little bit of groundwork from our part is very important. Making the learners or the participants or the attendees understand the real value of that training to them is actually the biggest gain. So you may have Amy involved in these processes, or so many other people who they have the content, they have their work very well done, but you must get the minds of the attendants on board before you get, and it's all levels of staff, from the junior levels to the leaders to anybody attending any training. Make some effort to do the marketing, to make a proper understanding of why the relevance and the value add to them. So you have to sell it to make it look like it's what's in it for you. Because I think that's the other area that we try and make it. Sometimes we just want them to go and learn this and come and replicate it for the organization. Of course, we do the training boards. You're employed, and you have to do that. You bond them, and you make sure that once they have done this engineering course, which are very expensive, I see my engineers going to some courses that require a lot of money, yes, and you have to plan for them, and you have to be told now you have to have a retention strategy for this person because you've invested in them and all that. But have you gotten the heart and mind of that attendee to buy into the training? And then, of course, you're able then to get the best results of them. So don't focus so much on the return on investment on the company. Sell it to the employee. It gives a deeper meaning. And I think I want us to get outside of just the walls of our employers and look at that human being. These are the people who 10 years later remember that Helen sponsored, and they can even say it. Helen, when I was in this and this company, there's a HR person called Helen who sponsored me for this. It's what is making me the CEO I am today. So sometimes also look at that, because this training is for them for the longer term. The certificate becomes theirs. So also look at that depth of what you're doing to transform this human. So that becomes easier for us to get this done. Okay?
And I think maybe just adding a few, there could be additional things. And now here I'm speaking from an AMI perspective. Different organizations are at different levels, and sometimes in terms of cycles of work, the opportunities where you want to launch a program, and guess what, that's the busiest time of the organization, whether it's preparing for board papers, whether it's for investors, whether it's for reporting, whether it's closing on performance targets for a particular quarter. For sure, you throw a business development team into a training during that season, they will do everything possible to avoid, because they say at the end of the day, what's my KPI measure? Is it the targets you've given me, or is it attending training? And I'm speaking from experience because I dodged trainings from that reason. And it starts with why. Why for me? Which season? And like we said, when you engage with the learners before the actual program comes in, so that we avoid fatigue and people dodging, is which approach or methodology would be ideal for the learning to be disseminated? Is in-person better? Or is it okay if we stretch this over a certain period of time so that we don't lock you away for one whole week? We do a day per month for the next 5 weeks. Would that work? And I think these are the approaches that even we as AMI have had to encounter and rework how we are able to deliver our learning programs that gets to meet the different targets of people to address the kinds of challenges that you face. But I think usually the most important part is start with why. Why are you doing this? Why is it important? Beyond the organization, even for you. Where will this take you? Where do you see this opening you up to? And these are the things we hope that if you get to learn and bring back, will get us to this place. This is the calendar year. When is this best placed for us to have this program? And when they're involved in that process, ultimately, they'll say, this is whose training? Our training. Not training we've been sent to by HR. And normally, we've had these experiences before. They come to attend the training because they've been told, if you do not show up, show cause why. Isn't it? So why do they show up? Because if I don't show up, I'll have to show cause why. They're there physically, mentally, emotionally. They are looking for their tomatoes in their greenhouses or somewhere else, a plot they were supposed to buy, but they're not engaging in training. So we lose up in the long run. But I think, yes, maybe, just adding on to what Beth had said. We're running out of time. Susan, you wanted to add something. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Well, user problems, perhaps. Yeah, I was adding on to what both Nick and Beth said, and I think it still goes back to what we had talked about earlier. Even with whatever practices or policies that you have for your people, remember it's for your people, and they're not. And allow me to be a bit off script, but they're not cows. You're not going to herd them in a direction. You have to will them. And the best way to will anyone towards any direction is to help them see that that direction is of benefit to them. And you can only do that if you know them. So it goes back to seeing the human in your people. Go back and understand them. And it's a lot of what they've both said, you know. What seasons do they have? What aspirations do they have? What is uncomfortable for them? What's comfortable for them? Remember we talked about, you know, do I want to do virtual? Do I want to do physical? Do I want long term, short term? It's really a call to us. You won't survive 2025 and beyond if you don't see the human. And you just have to invest the time to see the human. And then now figure out how we appeal to the human, the inside in you or in your people to get us moving in that direction.
Very well said, Susan. We have probably time for one more. Yes, and I can see two hands. Maybe why don't we try the gentleman who's here first? And we're going to have more time, remember, like I said, when we have our break, where you can approach any of the panelists directly just together, because as we want to make sure we all get heard, we also have to be mindful about the time where we also get to finish in good time. Yes, sir. Over to you.
All right. Thank you very much. My name is Robert. I lead a company called Boxcraft. So mine is about, you talked about it's about the people. And I have a theory that I probably want to see if it works. So these people have certain soft skills. So what you've been talking about is a lot of soft skills, right? The emotional intelligence, good communication skills, all these different soft skills, right? So not everyone has these soft skills. So first of all, can they be learned? Because I really feel, especially if they're going to come from the heart, then if you've not learned some of these soft skills, then it's very difficult to teach. But then if then you want them to be in your managers, I also feel the reason why there are trainings, why we go for trainings, why AMI exists, is because the managers don't have some of these soft skills. Therefore, they have to go for training to understand how to do things better. But then when they come back, they've learned the theory, but again, if it's not coming from the heart, they'll just pacify the situation and not necessarily be effective long term. So the question is also, can you find some certain soft skills that are must-have for a manager that if they don't have that, then they are not a manager. They're not good managers. They cannot be or rather, they cannot be leaders. They can only just be managers.
Thanks, Robert. We were fighting over the mic here. Really great question. And there are many questions inside your question. So I'll start with the last one and then. Are there particular skills or competencies that you can define that determine whether somebody will be a good leader or manager? That was the last one that you left off with. And I'm a big culture enthusiast. And I think that's a great question to ask our leadership, which is all of you here in the room. In your organization, you have a culture. Whether it's sitting on paper, desired, or the existing, what we're living out, there's a culture. And that culture stays alive by the people. Remember, we said policies, procedures are to support the culture by guiding on the desired behavior. So yes, when you understand who you are as an organization and what culture you're standing for, then you start to identify the competencies and the profile of a suitable leader within your organization. Some of those things would be things like EQ. Some of those things would be adaptability, agility. Of course, you have your core competencies or your technical competencies that we all know and are usually sitting in our JDs, right? But you start to develop what a profile of a leader at Capwell looks like. So I know that a Capwell leader needs to look like this. And that starts to influence from the beginning at the recruitment stage. There's certain skills and competencies and person specifications you start to look for, because those are the kinds of people you want carrying your culture across the organization. Also, not everybody will come in with those. Or you already have an existing staff complement. What do you do to move the existing staff complement to where they have those competencies and skills? There are various things. Like you said, there's trainings, there's coachings, there's mentorship, which can be done both internally and externally. You have those people in the organization who you say, that is the Capwell culture we want. That is the AMI, that's the culture we want. Those are the people to engage within your organization, to start facilitating conversations, start being coaches within the organization for emerging leaders. Remember, as HR, you do succession planning, right? You identify your top talent. And I'm hoping you identify your top talent before you're calling them managers, so that you start working with them on a journey for developing them for leadership through various interventions. Not everyone can go to Stanford Seed to do the leadership executive management course, right? And they can go and do it and come back and still not have the desired behavior. But start having them showing up in with the ideal carrier of your culture. Put them in projects with those people. Have them learn from others. Remember, even a child, all of us as human beings, we learn quite memorable lessons from seeing. So put those people who are modeling the desired behavior, the desired culture in a place that we can all see. And after you put them there, let us see, oh, when you model that behavior, this happens. There's this reward. You grow, you get opportunities, you get what? And that wills your people to start living those competency skills, that culture that you want. Now, going back to the example of, is this born or learned? A lot of these skills that you're calling soft skills, but I call them core skills. There's core skills and technical skills. Soft skills, Elisha. But yes, they can be learned, and there's no one who has a master's in these skills. It's a continuous learning. For example, I'm an EQ enthusiast. I'm not an EQ expert, which somebody said, by the way. I'm not an EQ expert. I'm an EQ enthusiast, which means that I am focused on continuously learning. Continuous learning. So all these soft skills that we call soft skills, no one has mastered all of them or any of them. But we have to create an environment that promotes continuous development of all of us in those different soft skills that we have identified are what is the model culture for our organizations. And back to what you were saying, right? A lot of it needs to come from the top. So get them on board as soon as possible and start modeling it. Then get your champions for your culture that you want and put them in the limelight so that we start seeing this is what the desired behavior for Boxcraft. This is the desired behavior at Boxcraft, and this will get rewarded. Those are my 2 thoughts.
We're still fighting. No, I'm sure Asim also has something to say.
Yes,
but I'm just adding on to what Susan has said. And just to manage your expectations, it's a yes and no. It's yes. You may have managers who will not ever make the cut for leaders. But there's also a very clear line, or a very thin line, in understanding what leadership and being a leader is. Leadership is in all of us because we get to lead at our different levels. So we may have a supervisor that is just in charge of the security team, and that's a leader in that area of theirs. Or rather, has to practice leadership aspects. So I'm going to use the normal distribution curve, allow my mathematics here. And in that normal distribution curve, you'll always have, from those managers, they're ready to pick up leaders. And those that will always just get it. Even without the training, because I think if I understand where you're coming from, Robert, is you've done all these interventions, but it's still not getting reflected. So there are those who will pick it up, whether with training or not, because that's them. Sometimes it's really in the personality. They're the middle, the bell, where the bell curve is, that can lead, that can be pushed just a little bit to do this, and they get it also. But there's also these cavemen on the other end of the bell curve that you please just accept them as they are. And this is where diversity and inclusion comes in. Their strengths are in just being where they are. Just understand what it is that you can get from them without necessarily having to reward them by making them leaders because they've been in Boxcraft for 25 years. That is now where the difference comes in. Because you just need to appreciate, yes, I have this very loyal employee, hardworking, but they just, that's it. That's where they are best at. Because sometimes if you then push them into what we call the Peter's principle in HR, you promote them to their level of incompetence, then you mess that person. And you also mess yourself from an expectations point of view, from a company expectations point of view. So they're very good at what they do. Just ring fence and develop them and appreciate them and support them to be the best at that level. In terms of the team that is moving to leadership, just to add on to the EQ aspect that Susan has spoken about, there is what we look for from a point of a leader's point of view is a balance of all the intelligence and the main 4 levels of intelligence. You tick the box on IQ. Technically skilled, those ones, by the time they come into the shortlist, HR must have looked into that. Hiring managers must have looked into that. They have the right academic papers. Their headspace, their intellect is not in question. Their EQ is development. And this is where, and I like how Susan has put it. It's not, you don't get to graduate in emotional intelligence. You don't get a master's. You don't get, we are all at different phases in our emotional intelligence. Because some of us are thoroughly self-aware, but we need to keep learning and learning, relearning, depending on the circumstances. You might think you got it. You're very good at reading the room, but boy, you get into a different boardroom and you are like, I thought I got it all together, but this one I messed up. And that's why success without failure is not success. So we get, and it's human behavior. These things evolve every day. So emotional intelligence is the thing that we are really focusing on now. But there's social intelligence. Social intelligence is when we know how to influence upwards. It's how we are able to use our charisma. It's how we are able to use our networking. Is how it's different from emotional intelligence and IQ. It is how you know who, you know people, but you know who to talk to. Also, you have to know when a little bit. You have to, the timing bit. How do I get to my director? Is it through the board chair? And how do I do it? Is it during the cocktail when he's had a few stiff drinks and this and the other? That social intelligence is very important. And we need it even to influence this EQ from our bosses. You need that social intelligence. It could be actually just maybe even using their spouses sometimes. Sorry, but you have to do it professionally, You need this done, but how do you get into your boss? Social intelligence then plays a very important part in anyone that you want to be in your leadership. And then the most unspoken unspoken about intelligence is the adversity quotient. What has this person been through? What have they experienced? What are their life experiences for real that will make them make decisions from their, balanced decisions from their brains and hearts, and know what kind of experiences have these guys been through, so that whenever life pushes them through hard decisions, you're not struggling. Who did I leave to lead this meeting as the CEO? Oh my God, it is so-and-so is leading this meeting, and it's this. He might make one of the worst decisions ever. He doesn't have so much exposure in this and the other. So that adversity quotient is very important in a leader. You need to really get people who have been through it. And that's why experience, unfortunately or fortunately, plays a very important part. You don't want to just get somebody very green in a row and give them into some high-level decision making. So these work experience, these asking people what has been your hardest decision to make, when were you pushed in the deep end, how did you go through it, and listening through, and actually maybe confirming through your golf plays that actually that person was able to crack this, and you're thinking, yeah, I have a good person in my leadership team. So these checks and balances of that adversity quotient is very, very important, because somebody who has been through it, somebody who has swum through a very difficult situation and come out of it successfully. Every CEO wants to bring that brain in the room and use their experience, so that in the event that you're also in that situation, they will use something very experiential. So the balance of all those levels of intelligence are very important in a leader, in somebody you're calling leadership, but you want to have in the leadership skill, but there's no graduation for the other three. IQ, yes, you have a level of, the papers will speak for themselves, but they also need to keep sharpening their skills. But these other three, it's just different levels. Some are very high, some are low, we keep evolving, we keep making them better, we keep expanding them. But very important to ring fence that one that you can't, so that you don't kill, and it could be 2-3 people that you say, you know what, I appreciate this is the highest, this is the most you can contribute. I'll support you at this level, but then I need to get somebody else who can take the leadership role.
Wow. And I wish we could continue with more questions. Asim, I can see the mic is being handed over to you. I know you're a person of few words, but allow me to jump in on this one, because we're way ahead of our time at this moment.